The 3-day snap lockdown of Greater Brisbane has already ruined Easter for millions of Australians. It's not just the nearly 3 million locals confined to their homes at least until Thursday, essential work, vital shopping and an hour of exercise accepted, but the millions of others who'll reconsider their plans at this latest evidence of government panic and mistrust of their own track and tracing systems. I tell you, who'd want to go anywhere, even with the government's cut price flights, when there's every chance that they could be stuck interstate for a fortnight, or even when they manage to get home, quarantined? It's a bit like a bad movie. We keep watching it over and over again, isn't it? Borders slammed shut with a couple of hours' notice, plans up in the air, business confidence shattered, and well-placed anger at a government and a bureaucracy that now 12 months on owes us more than a shambolic tracing system that can't even cope with less than 10 active COVID cases. Yet again yesterday in Queensland were the familiar scenes of supermarket queues and pandemonium at airports. Businesses in Brisbane will be down hundreds of millions of dollars in takings and ruined orders, just as the JobKeeper subsidy cuts out and everyone in the tourism industry faces massive cancellations and bookings chaos, just as things were starting to vaguely look normal. And for what? Just a handful of community transmissions over the past 3 days, 10 yesterday and a further 10 today. Despite, of course, Queensland's Chief Health Officer declaring this just a few months back.
But we know how to manage them. We know what we need to do. So we can very rapidly respond, but not have to close everything down as we had to do back in March.
Now, if you're a panicked Queenslander, fair enough, you're probably happy enough to be locked down again. But if you're a small business owner or a tourism operator drowning in debt and through no fault of your own, battling to keep your workers and your home, you've got to wonder then why on earth, so many months into this pandemic, that your government can't get its COVID house in order. Why were health workers, doctors and nurses looking after COVID positive patients without being vaccinated? Why roll out vaccines to health workers as they have been without enforcing a no jab, no work policy for high risk health settings? They've made this rule today. Yet again, like in Victoria, why do we need mistake after mistake before these officials and ministers do the job we expect them to do? If New South Wales, with its gold standard tracing system, could cope with up to 20 new community cases a day through most of last July and August and stay open, and could also cope with up to 20 new cases of a supposedly more infectious UK strain after Christmas with a localised lockdown only, why can't Queensland cope with a minute number of new cases without putting 3 million people back under virtual house arrest? If it's not the Premier playing the politics of this for all it's worth, and I doubt that given the state election has been and gone, it can only be that more than a year into this pandemic, Queensland still doesn't trust its tracing teams to get on top of even a tiny number of cases. Now, as a nation, we have to be able to do better than this, because we can't go on indefinitely living stop-start lives, and we can't go on forever, not just shut away from the wider world, but subsequently shutting out each other state by state. Predictably, the shutters have come down again. Western Australia is closed to Queenslanders, and anyone entering Victoria or South Australia from Brisbane is now required into a mandatory quarantine period of 2 weeks. Even in New South Wales, as always, the state least inclined to panic, anyone coming in from Brisbane is required to isolate and test for 3 days at least. Now, as one of the 5 million Melburnians locked up for 4 months last year, I reckon most Australians are over these unnatural restrictions. And I get it, we don't want to surrender our relative freedom from this disease, but we are aware with vaccines there is light at the end of the tunnel. Now, if that's the case, we absolutely must have this vaccine rolled out as soon as possible. Now, it's been a slow start. Not helped, of course, by the vaccine nationalism in Europe holding up deliveries for us here in Australia. But with production now ramping up at CSL facilities here in Australia, there's no excuse not to have everyone jabbed by October. Amidst all the distractions of the past few weeks in Canberra, this is now an urgent, practical task for the Morrison government to focus on, rather than, as I said, all the Canberra bubble talk of recent months. This is where we need the PM and his team to get back to work, to get these vaccinations done, so the rest of us can get on with our lives. And this is particularly so, isn't it, with winter just around the corner, because if experience overseas has taught us anything, that's when we are the most vulnerable to an increase in infections.